Don't open that case.
Or what? You gonna play me a sad song? Step back, old man.
$200,000.
Cash, no bank source, that's civil forfeiture.
That money was awarded on stage 3 hours ago.
Then sue us.
File a form. Wait 90 days. Maybe you get lucky.
My office protects the soul of New Orleans.
Old studios burn all the time.
Soul, what did you put in that trumpet case?
Nothing you need to worry about.
The moment Detective Pierre Fontenot touched Solomon Bridges' trumpet case, he made the kind of mistake that ends careers. He didn't know that yet. He was too busy feeling invincible. 200,000. Fontenot said, counting the banded stacks under the parking garage's sodium light. Each stack crisp and new from the Grammy presentation 3 hours earlier. Cash currency. No declared bank source. Found in proximity to a known associate of the Third Ward Kings. He looked up at Solomon. You know what that is. Civil forfeiture. Solomon said, smart man. Fontenot smiled. It was the smile of someone who had done this many times before. We don't need a conviction. Don't need charges. See suspicious currency. We take it. You sue to get it back. He dropped the last stack into the duffel. Costs more than the currency, which is why most people just walk away. Solomon said, there it is. Solomon looked at the two detectives. Fontenot built like a refrigerator left in the sun. His partner, Ray Godet, younger and nervous. Jaw forward. Weight on the front foot. He looked at his trumpet case. Now open on the hood of their cruiser with the con inside the 1,956 bell with the dent from a night in Ramallah in 2003 that he had never explained to anyone. I'll need a receipt. Solomon said. Godet laughed. Fontenot zipped the duffel. What Fontenot did not know was that inside Solomon's trumpet case, inside the worn velvet lining, behind the valve oil, there was a transmitter the size of a shirt button that had been broadcasting everything he said to a federal server on Poydras Street for the last 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The FBI had been listening to Fontenot steal $200,000 in real time, and they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Special Agent Diane Tran had been running the Blue Crescent listening post for 3 years. She had documented 41 conversations connected to a forfeiture network she'd been trying to break since 2021. She had built the case with patience. She had not planned for tonight. Sol. She was on the phone before Solomon reached his car. We got all of it. I know. He said, the warrant request is already drafted. I can have Fontenot and Godet. Not yet. A silence that had several emotions in it. You're serious. Diane? He sat behind the wheel and watched the detective's taillights disappear down Tchoupitoulas. You've had 3 years of recordings. What have you built? A strong case on the forfeiture network. On Fontenot and Godet. Yes. Not on Metoyer. The silence this time was the kind that meant she was deciding how much to agree with. Councilman Gerald Metoyer had represented the 6th District for 11 years. He chaired the Public Safety Committee, gave passionate speeches about protecting New Orleans culture, and had his photograph taken with jazz musicians approximately 4 times per month. His wife's company had received over $4 million in city contracts since he took office. All no bid. We can get to Metoyer through Fontenot. Diane said, could. Might. Maybe. Solomon started the car. Or Fontenot lawyers up, and Metoyer spends the next decade handing out contracts. I'm asking for 3 days. To do what? To make sure this ends at the right floor. Solomon said, the morning after they took his money. Solomon drove to Magazine Street. He knew the building. Bright yellow awning, Baptiste's Creole kitchen. 23 years of Cornelius Baptiste's life. Pestinse. The awning was faded now. The sign was gone. Through the window, empty tables. Chairs up. Drop cloth on the bar. Fontenot and Gourdet had taken $68,000 from Cornelius's safe 4 years ago, 3 years of savings for his granddaughter's college. 2 appeals. Both denied. Second mortgage. Insurance lapse. The restaurant that survived Katrina didn't survive a civil forfeiture form. Cornelius Baptiste drove Uber now. Solomon stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Then he called a number he hadn't dialed in 4 years. Marcus. He said when the man answered, "I need you to find me an IRS agent." Marcus Webb had retired from the DEA and now ran a financial consulting firm in Atlanta. He and Solomon had spent 11 months in a place that operations reports called a forward operating environment, and that the men who had been there called other things, usually around 3 in the morning. Marcus was one of 7 people on Earth Solomon trusted without reservation. Metoyer. Marcus said, when Solomon finished, "That's the target. There's an IRS agent in the New Orleans field office, Cecile Washington. She's been building a tax case on Metoyer's wife's company for 18 months. She's been waiting for a direct link between Metoyer and the forfeiture operation. Pause. Her uncle was one of Fontenot's targets. Lost his catering business in 2021. Solomon looked at the closed restaurant. "Tell her I'd like to meet tonight," he said. Cecile Washington arrived at Blue Crescent that evening with 2 accordion folders and the focused energy of someone who had been waiting a long time for a particular door to open. She was compact and direct, with the watchfulness of people who spent careers looking for things that didn't want to be found. She spread documents across the console like a hand of cards. 23 operations in 5 years. She said, $1.4 million from musicians, restaurant owners, contractors, people with cash income outside the banking system. She spread a column of figures across the console. It moves through LLCs before it disappears. The registered agent on 4 of them is Douglas Arsenault, Metoyer's chief of staff. His office coordinates the targets. We had an informant confirm they received actual names. Actual amounts. She paused. The informant recanted. Solomon thought about what recanting usually meant. Metoyer's name doesn't appear anywhere. Cecile continued. I have a tax case on his wife's company, solid. But it stops at her. Metoyer has enough separation to walk. She closed the folder. I don't need more numbers. Solomon. I need a name. I need Fontenot to say Metoyer out loud. Somewhere we're authorized to record it. Solomon was quiet. He was thinking about what Clifton Duplessis had believed, that a room where people made honest things carried that honesty in its walls. He was thinking about Celestine's session next Thursday. The one she'd had booked for 3 weeks. The one she'd mentioned because she was excited about the new material. He had agreed in 2021 knowing this moment would come. He had thought about it for 6 days before saying yes. He thought about it again now. Not because the answer had changed, but because it deserved to be thought about every time. There's a coffee shop Fontenot likes in mid-city. Solomon said finally, he'll want to meet me there to find out if I'm going to be a problem. He looked at Diane across the table. Louisiana is one-party consent. My consent makes the recording admissible. And if that coffee shop's lease runs through one of Arsenault's LLCs, it does. Diane said quietly, we check. Then your existing warrant may already cover it. Solomon spread his hands. Pull him into that room. Get him to say Metoyer's name. And Cecile files the motion. Cecile looked at him. Why does it matter who files? Because this case belongs to 47 families. Solomon said, and one of them is yours. She was quiet for a moment. Then she started organizing her documents. Pull him in. She said, I'll be ready. On Tuesday evening, there was a Councilman Gerald Metoyer event a reception at the Contemporary Art Center to celebrate a new city initiative supporting New Orleans culture. Metoyer stood at the podium in a suit, the color of authority, and spoke for 20 minutes about protecting the city's artists. Its musicians, its culture bearers, these are not amenities. He said, with practiced gravity, these artists are the soul of this city, and my office will always stand between them and those who would exploit them. Solomon was in the back of the room, near the bar, holding a glass of water he hadn't drunk. He watched Metoyer work the crowd afterward, hand on the shoulder. Full 30 seconds of attention. The thing that made every person feel seen, standing 2 feet away the entire time, accepting champagne and smiling at the right moments, was Douglas Arsenault, Chief of Staff, registered agent for 4 of the LLCs. The man whose job was to make sure Metoyer's name never appeared anywhere inconvenient. Metoyer worked the room afterward, hand on the shoulder. Full 30 seconds of attention, and when he reached the back bar, he stopped in front of Solomon, extended his hand, and smiled. Solomon Bridges. He said, "The Grammy. I saw it on the news. Men like you are why this city still has a soul." Solomon shook his hand. He said nothing. He let the silence sit for exactly 1 beat too long, which Metoyer absorbed as humility, and which was something else entirely. Metoyer moved on to the next donor. Solomon set down his water glass and left. Fontenot called the next morning. He suggested the coffee shop in mid-city, casual, neutral, away from the office. He made it sound like a favor. Solomon arrived 10 minutes early. He bought a bag of coffee beans as a gift, and while the counter person wrapped it, stood near the espresso machine and placed a transmitter behind a framed pelican print on the shelf, matte black, the size of a coat button. Already authorized under the existing warrant on Arsenault's properties, he had placed devices like this in other rooms, in other cities, in other decades. The mechanics had not changed enough to require adaptation. He sat down. He waited. Fontenot arrived 12 minutes late and settled into the chair across from Solomon, the way men settle into chairs they own. "I want us to start over," Fontenot said. "The other night was abrupt. I understand that these things can feel that way." He folded his hands. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer. You walk away from the appeal. You don't talk to press. Don't talk to attorneys. Don't make noise. In exchange, Lou Crescent stays off our radar. Permanently. A pause. You've got something real over there on Chupatulas. Lots of artists. Lots of cash moving around. It would be unfortunate if we kept finding reasons to look at it." Solomon kept his voice even the way he'd kept it, even in rooms considerably less comfortable than this. "I want to make sure I understand the structure," he said, "because someone knew about the Grammy money 3 hours after the ceremony. Someone knew when I'd be alone, what I'd be carrying, which garage I use. That's not random patrol work." Fontenot's expression didn't change. "Good detective work. There's a coordinator," Solomon said. "Not an accusation, a man trying to understand a business arrangement. Someone who identifies the right moments. I want to know I'm talking to the right level." Fontenot studied him. The calculation behind his eyes was visible if you knew what to look for, weighing the value of reassuring a cooperative musician against the risk of saying anything specific. He made the wrong choice. They always did when they felt safe. "Councilman Metoyer's office works with us on public safety," he said, choosing each word. "High-cash events. Festival season. They flag occasions where significant currency is moving through the community. It's a coordination arrangement. Metoyer knows about specific targets. His office is aware of our operational priorities," Fontenot said. Diplomat's phrasing worn smooth by repetition. Solomon nodded slowly, as though this clarified something. "I see," he said. "I really do." He thanked the detective. He bought a second coffee, carried it out to the street, walked to his car, and sat for 60 seconds, watching the rearview mirror. Then he called Diane. How was the audio? Crystal clear. She said, Fontenot just put himself and Metoyer in the same sentence. On a recording, under existing warrant authorization, he could hear the controlled excitement in her voice, 3 years of patience arriving at its destination. Combined with the parking garage recording, combined with Cecile's financial trail, we have the nexus. Cecile files the motion. Solomon said, her case, her victims, her name on the paperwork. A pause. She'll agree to that. She better. Solomon said, it's her uncle's restaurant. What he had not told Diane was that 2 days before the coffee shop, the situation had gotten considerably more complicated. He was loading groceries into his car on Magazine Street when Godet pulled up alongside him alone. Personal vehicle. No badge visible. The kind of contact that didn't happen through official channels because it wasn't meant to. Fontenot thinks you're cooperative. Godet said through the window. The aggression from the parking garage had gone from professional to something raw, something that didn't follow procedure. I've been doing this longer than Fontenot. I know what cooperative looks like. Solomon set down his bags. He kept his face neutral and his hands visible, the way he'd learned to keep them in situations where the person across from him was calculating costs. We know about Marcus Webb. Gaudet said, former DEA supervisor. Atlanta. You two were in country together. He let that sit. We know you met with someone from the IRS field office 2 nights ago. We don't know who yet. His eyes moved to the studio down the street, then back. We also know Celestine Arsenault has a session booked at your studio next Thursday. Solomon said nothing. He was mapping the information, what was real, what was a guess being stated as fact to watch his face, what it meant that Godet knew enough to be dangerous, but not enough to have acted yet. Nice girl. Gaudet said. Good voice. Be a shame if something happened to the session. What kind of something? This city's old buildings have electrical problems all the time. Godet said it flatly. Without heat, which was worse than anger. Inspections get called in. Fire marshal has jurisdiction. A studio gets flagged. It can take months to reopen. If it reopens, he started the engine. Fontenot wants to resolve this quietly. I'm just making sure you understand what quiet is worth. He drove away. Solomon stood in the parking lot for a full 60 seconds. He was not frightened, or rather, he recognized fear as information rather than a state. The way he had learned to during years in places that didn't have names. Godet's visit meant the network knew something was moving. It meant the timeline had compressed. He picked up his groceries and called Diane. How fast can Cecile file the motion? 24 hours if she needs to. Diane said, she needs to. Solomon started the car. Godet just made contact. He knows about Marcus. He suspects the IRS angle, and he threatened Celestine's session. He doesn't know what he has, but he's going to start finding out. He pulled out into traffic. Move everything up. We file before he figures out what direction to look. Sol. A pause. If we file now, we lose the coffee shop recording, the parking garage recording plus Cecile's financial trail. Is that enough for the warrant? A longer pause. For Fontenot and Godet. Yes. For Metoyer, it might not be enough. No. It might not. Solomon drove. He thought about Celestine's session. He thought about what electrical problems meant in a building on Chupitula Street. In a neighborhood where buildings had been burning for decades, under circumstances that never quite resolved into arson charges, he thought about 47 families. I'll get the coffee shop recording, he said. But if anything moves before I'm done, if Godet makes any approach to the studio or to any of my artists, you pull the trigger on the warrant, regardless. Understood. And Celestine's session is Thursday. Make sure someone is watching the building Wednesday night. Already done. Diane said, I had eyes on it before you called. Solomon breathed out. He called Fontenot and said he'd been thinking about the offer and would like to talk it through in person. Somewhere quiet, Fontenot suggested the coffee shop in mid-city. The motion was filed Thursday morning at 9:14. Forfeiture. 4 warrants had been issued. Fontenot was picked up at the 8th District. Gaudet at his house in Gentilly. Still in his robe, which the arresting agents noted in the report with the particular detachment of people who had seen worse. Arsenault was at City Hall, in a meeting about the city's cultural preservation budget, which was, under the circumstances, the kind of detail that would have been funny in another context. And Gerald Matoya was at a fundraising lunch at Commander's Palace. Solomon was at the studio when Diane called. He had come in early, alone, before the building opened, and stood in the recording booth without turning on any equipment, just looking at Clifton Duplessis's acoustic panels, the photographs of Irma Thomas, Alain Toussaint, the meters. People who had made honest things in this room before Solomon got here, they're executing now, Diane said. Her voice had the quality of controlled excitement that people who do careful work carry when that work arrives at its destination. Fontenot, Gaudet, Arsenault, all in custody. Metoyer is at Commander's Palace. A pause. The deliberate kind. 2 agents are in the building. Tell me when it's done. He set the phone on the console. He waited. 4 minutes later, he's in custody. Solomon sat down in the private dining room of Commander's Palace. The arrest had gone the way these things go when they are handled by people who are very good at their work. 2 agents. Entering through the service corridor, the maître d'hôtel who saw them coming and understood immediately and stepped aside without being asked. 14 people at 2 tables, donors. City staffers. People who had built their understanding of Gerald Matoya on 20 years of speeches and photograph opportunities, going completely still as the agents crossed the room. Matoya had tried to stand. One agent put a hand on his shoulder. Gently. The way you do it when the choice has already been made and you want the other person to understand that without requiring them to be told. He smiled once. Reflexively, the politician's smile, the one that arrived before the man understood. There was no audience left to convince. Then the smile went away. And what was underneath it was just a person who had run out of room. Someone filmed it on their phone. The video would be viewed 11 million times by the following morning. What people kept sharing wasn't the handcuffs. It was that smile, the half-second where the reflex fired and then collapsed. The moment a man who had spent 20 years controlling how people saw him lost control of his own face. The door closed. The garden room erupted in the sound of 14 people speaking at once. The press conference was at 4. The U.S. attorney spoke for 20 minutes. She named 23 operations over 5 years. $1.4 million seized from 47 families. 9 victims whose funds would be returned immediately with interest. Pending documentation of the additional cases, she named Cornelius Batiste, twice his restaurant, his granddaughter's savings, the 2 appeals that were denied, the second mortgage, the insurance lapse. She mentioned Solomon's name once. As the owner of the property that had served as a listening post, after it was over, Solomon called Cornelius, my granddaughter. Cornelius said. There was something in his voice that Solomon recognized the specific weight of a man who had been carrying something for 4 years and had just been told he could set it down. Not joy exactly. Something more complicated than joy. She starts at Tulane in September. I know. Solomon said, she's going to be fine. He hung up before Cornelius could say anything that required a response. Then he drove to the studio. He had calls to make. 3 musicians had left messages during the week. He called them back in order. The first 2 were hard. He explained what he could federally authorize surveillance, targeted to a specific criminal network. Their music had never been recorded or shared. The investigation was closed. Silence. Then careful questions. Then longer silence. He answered what he could answer. They thanked him, each in their own way. and the quality of each thank you told him something different about whether they would come back. The third call was Celestine. She was already at the studio when he arrived, standing in the recording booth in the low light. Looking at the photographs on Clifton's acoustic panels, she didn't turn around when she heard him come in. "You let us record our lives in a room the government was listening to," she said. "Yes. For 3 years. Yes." She turned around. Her face was not angry exactly. It was the expression of someone recalculating something they thought they understood. Working through a problem that did not have a clean answer. "Did you know it would come to this?" she asked. "When you agreed to it, I knew what I was agreeing to." Solomon said, "I didn't know exactly how it would end, but you knew we'd be in here, singing, thinking this room was ours." He didn't answer. The answer was yes, and they both knew it. $1.4 million. He said after a moment, 47 families, Cornelius Batiste's restaurant, and Godet was going to burn this building Wednesday night if we didn't move when we did. Your session Thursday morning wouldn't have happened. He held her gaze. "I made a choice. I'm not pretending it didn't cost anything." Celestine looked at him for a long time. Then she looked back at the photographs. "Some people aren't coming back," she said. "I know. I don't know if I am. I know that too." She left without saying anything else. He stood in the booth alone, in the room that had been a listening post and was now trying to figure out what it was going to be. He played trumpet for an hour in the dark without turning on any equipment, without anyone listening. Not a song. Just sound, the kind of conversation between notes that happened when the thing being thought about didn't have words in any other language. What Celestine had asked was the question he'd been carrying since 2021. He had sat with it for 6 days before saying yes to Diane in the parking garage, and he was sitting with it again now. In the room he'd spent 30 years building. If saving your community means betraying the place where your community trusted you, did you save it? Or did you break it? He didn't have an answer that was fully clean. He had done what he'd done, and 47 families were getting something back, and this room would carry what had happened in it. And all of those things were true at the same time, with equal weight. That was what decisions looked like when they mattered enough to make. He played until there was nothing left to say. Gerald Matoya resigned from city council the morning after his arrest. Fontenot and Godet were charged with civil rights violations, wire fraud, and theft under color of law. Arsenault cooperated with prosecutors and spent 4 hours providing testimony that expanded the investigation into 3 additional city departments. Solomon's $200,000 was returned by wire transfer 11 days later. He looked at the number once. Then he called the contractor who had looked at Batiste's Creole Kitchen on Magazine Street. "What does the building need?" he asked. "Wiring." "Afat." "Exhaust." "Nothing structural. It's sound. Send me the estimate." Solomon said, "I want to make sure the man who owns it doesn't have to sell it." He set the phone down. He looked at the studio around him, the console, the panels, the photographs, the con-trumpet on its stand. Not everything comes back clean, but some things come back. That has to be enough. If you're still listening, you already know why this one stayed with you. Solomon Bridges had everything he needed to walk away. The career, the reputation, the Grammy. He chose the harder path, knowing it would cost him the room he'd spent 30 years building. Here's what I keep thinking about. If saving your community means betraying the place where your community trusted you, did you save it? Or did you break it? Celestine walked out. She might not come back. Was Solomon right? Leave it in the comments. And if you want the next story, the one about another man who thought the system would protect him, subscribe. Because they always think they're untouchable. They never are.